Chapter 40, 7 Going Alone. After parting ways with Ning Yao at the archway, Chen Ping'an returned to Clay Vase Alley, knocking on the gate as he yelled, "Song Jishin, are you home?" Zhe Gui was in the kitchen, suffering from hiccups, and she scooped up some water using a gourd spoon. After drinking the water, she was instantly feeling a lot more refreshed, and she set down the gourd spoon before rushing out of the kitchen to open the gate. There was a slightly suspicious look on her face as she said, "My young master isn't home at the moment. Why are you knocking on our gate, Chen Ping'an? Haven't you always spoken to us over the wall from your yard?" "I have something to speak to Song Jishin about," Chen Ping'an replied. Zhe Gui opened the gate as she jibed, "What a rare honor this is." She took a glance at Chen Ping'an's expression, then asked, "What do you need to speak to my young master about? If it's nothing urgent, I can pass on a message for you. If it's urgent, then you'll probably have to go look for him at the Kiln Supervision Official's office. As you're aware, my young master is on very good terms with the new Kiln Supervision Official, Master Song." She noticed that Chen Ping'an was standing completely still on the spot, as if his feet were rooted to the ground, and she rolled her eyes as she said, "What are you standing there for? Come in. Are you afraid that we're keeping tigers in here, or are you worried that we'll charge an entry fee?" An amused look appeared on her face as she chuckled. "I'm sure the latter must be the more terrifying possibility for you." Chen Ping'an forced a smile onto his face as he said in a quiet voice, "I actually came here to see you. I only yelled for Song Jishin just now because I was worried he would misunderstand my intentions." A meaningful smile appeared on Zhe Gui's face as she said, "All right, what do you need? But before you tell me, let me make this clear in advance. While we're indeed neighbors, at the end of the day, I'm just a powerless little servant who isn't really good for anything. However, if the problem you've run into is something that can be resolved with money, and you're here to borrow some from me, then you're in luck. I do have some ways to get you the money that you need." A wry smile appeared on Chen Ping'an's face as he replied, "Unfortunately, it's not a matter of money. What happened is that Liu Xianyang was severely injured by someone over at the covered bridge, and even shopkeeper Yang from the medicine shop has no way to save him." "Why haven't I heard about this? Who did Liu Xianyang have a run-in with this time?" Zhe Gui asked with a puzzled expression. "It was an outsider from a place called Sun Scorch Mountain," Chen Ping'an replied in a resigned manner. A curious look appeared on Zhe Gui's face as she asked, "In that case, are you trying to find a good plot of land to act as Liu Xianyang's burial site? That's not difficult. I can get my young master to put a word in for you with the Kiln Supervision Official, and he should be able to send his steward or porter to visit Old Man Wei on Peach Leaf Alley to arrange a plot of land. As long as it's not a plot of land in the areas sealed off by the Imperial Court, it shouldn't be difficult to arrange." Chen Ping'an's complexion was already quite dark, and his face darkened even further upon hearing this. Zhe Gui seemed to have also realized that she was mistaken, and she habitually grimaced, revealing 2 rows of bright and even teeth as she leaned back against the couplets on the wall. She then cocked her head to the side with an amused smile as she asked, "Chen Ping'an, do you want me to repay you for saving my life? I'm happy to do so, but I'm just a servant. Even shopkeeper Yang wasn't able to do anything. What could I possibly do?" After a brief hesitation, Chen Ping'an said, "Wang Zhu, I know that you're not an ordinary person. That day during the snowstorm, I knew you were different as soon as I saw you from the front door of my house. After that, you were also the first one to identify that the snake gall pebbles were no ordinary stones. Thinking back now, the look in your eyes when you look at us is no different from the expressions worn by the outsiders when they look at us." "I won't deny that," Zhe Gui replied with an amused smile. "Not only do I look down on mere mortals like yourself, I'm just as disdainful of those so-called immortal cultivators." Zhe Gui was thinking that to herself, but she refrained from articulating it. Some things that were completely justified in her eyes were regarded as extreme arrogance from the perspectives of others. "I came here to ask you if there's a way to save Liu Xianyang. I used my locust leaf, but that was only able to prevent Liu Xianyang from dying on the spot. It didn't do much, but at the very least, it did serve some purpose. I came here to ask if you have any locust leaves, particularly spare locust leaves that you can give me," Chen Ping'an said. Gui pointed at herself as she asked, "Are you asking if my young master has any locust leaves, or me, a little maidservant with no parents?" Chen Ping'an was looking directly at Gui as he said, "Even if Song Jishin had any locust leaves to spare, he wouldn't give them to me. What I'm asking is, if you have any locust leaves, would you be willing to give them to me? And if not, do you know of any other ways to save Liu Xianyang?" Gui stroked her own chin with one hand while gently patting her own belly with the other, shaking her head as she replied, "I'm afraid I don't have any locust leaves. Seriously, I'm not lying to you. If you had come to me earlier, perhaps I would have still had a few left. As for other methods to save Liu Xianyang, I can't help you there either. I'm not a god, so how could I possibly know any way to revive someone from the brink of death? You're asking too much of me, Chen Ping'an. It looks like I was wrong about you. I thought you wouldn't be one of those people who would extort me just because you saved me once." Chen Ping'an still wasn't willing to give up. "Do you really not know any ways to save Liu Xianyang? Even if it's something beyond my reach, tell me so that I at least know what to aim for." "I don't have anything," Gui replied with a firm shake of her head. "I see," Chen Ping'an replied with a smile, then turned and departed, quickly fading out of view. Gui stood on Clay Vase Alley in front of the entrance of Song Jishin's courtyard, watching Chen Ping'an's departing figure with a complex look on her face. She seemed to both be lamenting his ill fortune, while also frustrated by his selflessness. In the end, she grumbled to herself, "How could you just waste your locust leaf like that? You know what? You can go and die with Liu Xianyang. The sooner you die, the sooner you get reincarnated, and if you're lucky, maybe you'll continue to be good friends in the next life. At the very least, you'll be more fortunate than those poor suckers who don't even get a next life." As Gui strode over the doorstep to re-enter the yard, she inadvertently burped, and a mocking sneer appeared on her face as she mused to herself, "I had a little bit too much to eat." All of a sudden, she sped up and rushed forward, then stomped down heavily with one foot. After that, she slowly crouched down to glare at the four-legged snake beneath her foot as she scolded, "If you return your debt on time, I'd be happy to lend to you again. But if you 5 little bastards dare to renege on your debts at any point, I'll skin you all and cook you up in a single pot." The four-legged snake beneath her foot was struggling with all its might while screeching in a pitiable manner, as if it were begging for mercy. After leaving Clay Vase Alley, Chen Ping'an ran all the way to the school, only to be informed by an elderly janitor that just the day before, Qi Jingchen had traveled deep into the mountains outside of the town with 3 guests from out of town. He said that he was going on an adventure and that he wouldn't be back for at least 3 days. Chen Ping'an was very disappointed to hear this, and right as he turned to leave, the janitor suddenly recalled something. He called out to Chen Ping'an, then said, "I forgot to mention that before Mr. Qi left, he told me that if a boy from Clay Vase Alley came to find him, then I should tell that boy that he's already told you everything that you need to hear, and that the outcome wouldn't have been different regardless of whether he was at the school or not today." Chen Ping'an seemed to have anticipated this outcome, and the final ray of hope in his eyes had completely faded. However, he still extended a grateful bow toward the janitor as he said, "Thank you, sir." The old man hurriedly stepped aside as he waved his hands with a humble smile. "Don't call me sir, that's too lofty a title for me to bear." The old man watched as Chen Ping'an slowly departed, and along the way, he seemed to have raised an arm to wipe at his own eyes. The old man shook his head as he heaved a faint sigh. He couldn't help but think of Song Jishin and Zhao Yao, who were both of a similar age to Chen Ping'an, but their lives had taken completely different trajectories compared with Chen Ping'an's. Fate could bless one with wealth and fortune, but it could also just as easily do the opposite. Chen Ping'an returned to Clay Vase Alley, picking up the final pouch of copper coins that he had hidden in a clay pot, and with the 3 pouches of coins, he stepped onto Fortune Street in search of the Kiln Supervision official's office. After hearing Chen Ping'an's self-introduction, the porter was rather befuddled. Chen Ping'an had told him that he was Song Jishin's neighbor on Clay Vase Alley, and that he was here to see Song Jishin and Master Song, the Kiln Supervision official. Chen Ping'an sneakily handed the porter a gold essence copper coin that he had prepared in advance, and the porter took a glance at the coin in silence, massaging it between two of his fingers, but seemed to be in no hurry to say anything. Chen Ping'an quickly handed another coin to him, but the porter didn't take the coin. Instead, he merely smiled and said, "I can see that you're a smart lad, so I have no qualms referring you to Master Song. Otherwise, it would be nothing short of a tragedy if I were to lose this job because of you. Hold on to that copper coin for now. You can give it to me if the steward of the manor allows you to enter the office. If not, then I won't be able to help you, and I wouldn't deserve the additional copper coin. What do you say?" Chen Ping'an nodded vigorously in response. Shortly thereafter, the elderly steward arrived with the porter, and the latter gave Chen Ping'an a subtle look, indicating for him to refrain from offering any further copper coins, as offering and accepting bribes were major crimes. Thankfully, Chen Ping'an seemed to have received the hint, and he followed the steward to the rear hall of the office. The porter heaved a faint sigh as he looked on at the two departing figures. He was rather perplexed about why the steward had agreed to let the boy enter the office as soon as he heard that it was a boy with the Chen surname from Clay Vase Alley. Since when had the requirements for entering the office become so low? At the same time, the porter was feeling a little guilty. Just now, he had been implicitly attempting to convince the steward to avoid any potential trouble and turn Chen Ping'an away. However, he hadn't made this explicitly clear. He was confident that given how experienced and wily the steward was, he would have been able to read between the lines. If the steward were to refuse to grant Chen Ping'an entry, then the porter would be able to keep that one copper coin without accepting any risk. And he could also say that he had done everything he could, so he would have a clear conscience as well. Now, he could only hope that Chen Ping'an wasn't a troublemaker. In the main room of the office's rear hall, a tall man in a white robe was drinking tea while sitting on the main seat. Song Jishin was seated in a guest chair on the left, playing with a bamboo folding fan, opening and closing it over and over again. There was a smile on his face as he watched Chen Ping'an being led into the room. The pristine white robe worn by the tall man created a stark contrast with the black chair he was seated on. The steward departed, and the man on the main seat set down his teacup as he smiled and said, "Take a seat anywhere you like, Chen Ping'an. We've actually already met on Clay Vase Alley, but I didn't recognize you at the time. Otherwise, I would have already greeted you." Song Jishin was feeling rather amused. Only he could tell that the man was clearly not very accustomed to referring to himself as I. Chen Ping'an sat down on a chair across from Song Jishin. The man didn't waste any time as he asked, "Chen Ping'an, did you come to see me because of what happened to Liu Xianyang?" Chen Ping'an rose to his feet as he said, "Master Song, I hope you can hand down the culprit from Sun Scorch Mountain a severe punishment, rather than just evicting him from the town." The man smiled as he replied, "The town is actually a lawless place, which means that it doesn't follow the laws of any empire, so as a kiln supervision official, I'm in a rather awkward position. I have no right to oversee the matters of this place, and additionally, there's always been a tradition in the town where the residents very rarely turn to officials for criminal matters. Regardless of whether it's someone from an affluent family beating a servant to death, or someone from a less privileged family injuring someone else during a brawl, no one has the habit of turning to authorities for justice. Hence, I'm afraid you've come to the wrong person, Chen Ping'an." The man was very polite and pleasant in his words and demeanor, and there was no sense of arrogance to him at all. Chen Ping'an pulled out the 3 pouches of copper coins, then set them down onto the tall stool next to his chair before turning back to the white-robed man as he said, "Master Song, I know that you're a very powerful man, and I want to know if you can save Liu Xianyang. Even if you can't, would you be able to uphold justice for him? We can't just let the culprits get evicted from the town for killing him and have that be the end of the matter." The man burst into laughter. "I'm a very powerful man. That young woman from last time must have told you that, right? Judging from that, she must possess exceptional aptitude for martial arts, even more so than your friend, Liu Xianyang. Let me tell you the truth, I only know how to kill people, and I'm really not very good at saving people. Besides, why would I break an ironclad rule that's been honored for thousands of years here just for a young man that I've only met once?" The man pointed at the 3 pouches of copper coins, then continued, Without that suit of armor and the sword scripture, his life isn't worth that much money, and if you want me to do you a favor, then that amount of money is nowhere near enough. There's no way that our great Li Empire would turn on Sun Scorch Mountain just for 3 pouches of coins. If word were to spread of this, it would be a massive joke across the entire eastern treasured vile continent. Chen Ping'an, you may not understand what I'm saying right now, but if you have the opportunity to do so in the future, go out and take a look at the world. You'll understand that what I'm telling you now is the truth. Chen Ping'an gritted his teeth, then asked, Master Song, can you tell me what I would have to do for you to step in? Even if you think it's something that's far beyond my capabilities, at least tell me so I have something to aim for. A hint of surprise appeared in the man's eyes, and he smiled as he said, Chen Ping'an, I'm not looking down on you or intentionally making things difficult for you. On the contrary, I think you're a very interesting person, and that's why I'm willing to spend the time to explain these things to you. Do you understand? Chen Ping'an nodded in response. Meanwhile, Song Jishin was seated with his legs crossed on his chair in a rather casual and uncouth manner, and he was gently tapping his own knee with his closed folding fan. The outcome of this conversation didn't matter to him, so he was happy just to sit back and observe. Song Changjing paid no heed to Song Jishin's uncouth demeanor. In this town, the amount of information that he was privy to was second only to that of Qi Jingchen, and given everything that he knew, he declared, Chen Ping'an, there's no need for you to feel guilty and think that your friend died because of you. In reality, Liu Xianyang was already beyond saving from the moment he refused to hand over the sword scripture. There was no way that Sun Scorch Mountain would have allowed him to live if he didn't relinquish the sword scripture to them, and no one would have been able to stop them, even Qi Jingchen or Master Ruan. That's not to say that no one can beat that old ape in a battle, it's just that the cost incurred would be far too steep, and it simply wouldn't be worth it for them. Song Changjing took a sip of tea, then continued in a casual voice. Chen Ping'an, have you considered why it is that someone like you, who is most undeserving of ancestral blessings, received a locust leaf? Yet Liu Xianyang didn't receive even a single locust leaf despite his brilliant aptitude for cultivation. Pardon my intrusion, Master Song, Chen Ping'an said as he stowed away his 3 pouches of copper coins, then stood up to take his leave. Song Changjing didn't try to keep him, and he even stood up to see Chen Ping'an off. Song Jishin was just about to stand up as well in a reluctant manner, only to spot his uncle shaking his head ever so slightly, and he needed no further discouragement, immediately sitting back down before leaning lazily against the back of his chair. Right as they arrived at the doorstep, Song Changjing suddenly said, There are 2 things within my capabilities that I'm unable to do. If you can do just one of those 2 things, I can consider teaching that old ape a lesson for you. Chen Ping'an immediately stopped and turned to Song Changjing with a serious expression. Song Changjing continued, The first thing I want you to do is to find an opportunity to kidnap the little girl accompanying that old ape. In doing so, you'll send him into a panic and force him to stay in the town. The other thing I want you to do is cut down that old locust tree in secret at night, then pull out the metal chain in the iron lock well. You can do both of those things, or just one of the 2. If you can do one of those things, I'll severely wound the old ape for you, and if you do both of those things, I'll kill him for you. This is a promise, and I will not go back on it. Song Changjing paused here momentarily, then said something that was a little puzzling. Chen Ping'an, I trust that you can sense whether you're being lied to or not. Chen Ping'an departed in silence. He didn't immediately jump on the opportunity and promised to carry out the 2 tasks assigned to him, but Song Changjing wasn't surprised to see this at all. Standing at the entrance of the room, his back was facing Song Jishin as he asked, You know him far better than I do. Do you think he'll do what I ask of him? Song Jishin shook his head as he replied, It's hard to say. Under normal circumstances, it's extremely difficult to get him to do anything against his will, but if it's for Liu Xianyang's sake, then perhaps there's a chance. Song Changjing stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking up at the sky as he said, If that boy really can give me a pleasant surprise, then I'll take that opportunity to get involved in this matter. Regardless of whether it's allying myself with Sun Scorch Mountain or Wind Lightning Field, there can only be one option and no way to befriend both powers. Alternatively, I could simply observe as a neutral bystander and allow the two powers to continue their Cold War in our Great Li Empire. Which of those do you think is the best option for our Great Li Empire? Song Jishin rose to his feet, gently tapping his closed folding fan on the palm of his other hand while slowly pacing back and forth. After considering the question for a moment, he replied, "In times of peace, the latter option would be best, while the former option would be more suited to times of chaos and unrest." An amused smile then appeared on his face as he continued. "Having said that, regardless of whether the world outside the town is going through times of peace or unrest, at the very least, it seems like you've already made your choice." Song Changjing burst into laughter. "What is a warrior like me supposed to do during times of peace? Act as a lapdog for the scholars." Song Changjing turned to Song Jishin, then said, "I can already tell that Chen Ping'an is the true root of your internal demon, and it'll be very difficult for you to overcome this internal demon in a short time. If you leave the town without first resolving this matter, then that would be very detrimental to your future cultivation. Hence, you can see for yourself how a once pure and earnest young boy becomes the exact opposite of everything that he once was. At that point, you'll feel like there's simply no point in holding a grudge against someone like that." Song Jishin opened his mouth to say something, but refrained from doing so in the end and fell into deep thought. Song Changjing made his way back into the room, then sat down on the main seat before tipping his head back and downing all of the tea in his cup in one go. "I played this petty little trick on that boy not just so I can find a contrived reason to get involved in the conflict between Sun Scorch Mountain and Wind Lightning Field. In addition to that, I also wanted to teach you a lesson, which is that on your future path of cultivation, anyone could become your enemy, even me, your uncle." Song Jishin was dumbfounded to hear this. Song Changjing continued with a mocking sneer. "If an internal demon is not plucked out by oneself, then it'll continue to linger and could easily return in full force at the slightest catalyst. You are about to become the heir to the Great Li Empire, and you must be filled with anger and indignation, right? But what can you do? You feel like you're nothing more than Chen Ping'an's plaything, and there's nothing that you can do about it." Song Jishin glowered intently at Song Changjing, while holding his folding fan with a white-knuckle grip. Song Changjing sat down on his chair, casting his gaze out of the room as he continued, seemingly talking to himself. "The more people you see in the future, the more you'll come to realize something interesting, which is that things like karma, justice, and happily ever afters are nothing more than romanticized stories made up by trash to console themselves. They're unable to do anything about the injustice in their lives, so they turn to these fairy tales for some form of consolation. Hence, you must become strong at all costs. If you're thinking about relying on me or your parents, then I suggest you do away with those thoughts right now. Otherwise, taking you out of this town will be no different from killing you. Even members of imperial families must be responsible for their own lives." Song Jishin was sweating profusely as he sat down on his chair in a defeated manner. Even though Song Jishin had hidden his complacency and contentment very well after learning his true identity, Song Changjing was able to see right through him, right down to his innermost feelings and insecurities. Song Changjing cast his gaze toward the distance, and it was as if his gaze could reach all the way to Old Dragon City at the southernmost point of the eastern treasured Vile continent. For some reason, a quote sprang into his mind: "The human heart is like a mirror. The cleaner and more pristine it once was, the less capable it is of withstanding trials and tribulations." Even though Song Changjing looked down on scholars for being all talk and no action, he had to admit that some of the things that came out of the mouths of those very same scholars were concepts that a warrior like him wouldn't be able to think of even after living for 1,000 years. Song Changjing did away with that train of thought as he pointed a finger toward the south as if it were a halberd, and he declared, "If you think what I'm saying to you today is incorrect, then you're entitled to your opinion, but you have to keep it to yourself. Only once we reach Old Dragon City and we swap positions in the future will I consider listening to what you have to say." At this point, Song Jishin had already regained his composure, and he smiled as he said, "I look forward to that day." At the entrance to the kiln supervision official's office, Chen Ping'an gave the porter a second copper coin as per their agreement. At the archway, Chen Ping'an spotted Ning Yao, and he quickly rushed over to her. She was standing right under the plaque that read Unmatched Aura, and she asked, "How did it go?" Chen Ping'an shook his head in response. "I was only able to meet 3 of the people I was looking for. I didn't get to meet Mr. Qi, but I already knew his answer from the very beginning." Indeed, Mr. Qi had already told him that he wouldn't be getting involved in this matter. Ning Yao's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. Chen Ping'an told Ning Yao to be careful, then rushed away like the wind. First, he went to the Yang family's medicine shop, using a gold essence copper coin to purchase a bunch of medicines, medicinal ingredients, and ointments for treating external and internal injuries from an old man that he was familiar with. He knew exactly how to use everything that he had bought. Pottery firing at the kilns was a labor-intensive job, and accidents often happened. Old man Yao never took a liking to Chen Ping'an, but even he had to admit that Chen Ping'an was very good at performing simple manual labor tasks. In addition to that, he had a good and pure heart, so old man Yao often entrusted him with money to purchase things for the kiln, such as medicines and medicinal ingredients for the kiln's injured potters. After returning to his house on Clay Vase Alley, Chen Ping'an closed the door before beginning to brew medicine, following a recipe for a medicine to treat internal injuries. While waiting for the fire to get up to the desired heat, he placed a garment that had faded from repeated washing onto the table, spreading it out before tearing it into a series of cloth strips. He was renowned for being miserly and stingy, but he didn't hesitate at all to tear this perfectly good garment to shreds. After that, he used the cloth strips to tie the skirt dagger that Ning Yao had lent to him to his arm. In addition to that, he also tied a series of cloth strips around his calves and his wrists. He then pulled down a wooden bow from the wall that he had made himself, and after a brief moment of hesitation, he decided against bringing it. Instead, he picked up a slingshot and a bag of rocks that were sitting on his windowsill. Even though Chen Ping'an knew that he was fighting a losing battle, he was like a stubborn mule who refused to give up. He simply couldn't allow himself to give up as long as there was even a single stone that was left unturned. This was why he had repeatedly begged shopkeeper Yang to save Liu Xianyang, even though the old shopkeeper had already given up. He had gone to Zhe Gui, who he knew was no ordinary person, in the hope that she would have a way to save Liu Xianyang. He had then gone to Mr. Qi with the slim hope that he would uphold justice for Liu Xianyang. Finally, he had gone to the kiln supervision official, Master Song, who Ning Yao had deemed to be a master martial artist, laying out everything that he had to try and employ Master Song's service. From the very beginning, he knew that his chances were extremely slim, so the disappointment that he felt right now wasn't all that severe. In reality, Song Changjing didn't know Chen Ping'an at all, and neither did Song Jishin, even though he had been Chen Ping'an's neighbor for so long. There were some things that he had to do, even if it cost him his life, but there were also some things that he absolutely couldn't do, even if the only other alternative was to die. Chen Ping'an squatted down in a corner of the room, patiently waiting for the medicine to finish brewing. He was brewing a very strange medicine that had no purpose other than to numb pain. There was once a man at the kiln who had fallen ill with a rather peculiar condition, and not only was he in excruciating pain for almost an entire day. The pain was so severe that his entire face and all of his limbs had become twisted. After that, the Yang family's medicine shop provided this recipe, and after drinking the medicine, the man passed away very soon thereafter, but he did so in a completely painless manner. In fact, he even had the energy to sit up and deliver some final words, then took one final look at the kiln with old man Yao physically supporting him. Chen Ping'an had a feeling that this medicine would come in useful. While waiting for the medicine, Chen Ping'an took off his old and ragged straw sandals, then pulled out a pair of brand new shoes that he had never been able to bring himself to wear. After that, he pulled out a clay pot and took out the porcelain shard inside. Around an hour later, Chen Ping'an had finished all of his preparations, and he opened the gate of his yard before silently making his way out onto Clay Vase Alley. It was close to dusk, and the light of the sun was no longer so bright and piercing. The clouds in the sky were glowing red from the dying radiance of the setting sun, presenting a beautiful sight to behold. Chen Ping'an made his way toward Fortune Street, and by the time he got there was no one else on the Bluestone Street.